Hello, Dr. Amit Arya. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. Thank you very much for coming on to Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure having you on, coming on to the show and talking about the home care and the long-term care that and what you see on a daily basis when you go in, and the impacts that the healthcare system is having on that.
Right. Yeah. I'm very happy to share some of those important perspectives.
Yeah, and I had some questions, for you. I can start out with the questions I have for you first here, and then we'll continue on. So, how many PWD are in long-term care or home care that you see when you're there?
I don't have numbers for home care, and I do have some numbers for long-term care. But essentially, to answer this question, Brent, really everyone who I see in long-term care or in the home care system is someone who is living with a disability, some type of disability. This could be a disability which is in the context of a life-limiting illness, where perhaps they have a limited life expectancy, not necessarily at the end of life. A lot of times people confuse palliative care for end of life care, and I'd be very happy to elaborate on that later. But it might be somebody who's perhaps in the last years of life. Mm-hmm. Or in the last months of life. That's actually quite normal. And once again, someone living with a profound disability, I would say that's actually everyone that I'm seeing as a palliative care physician. Specifically, I can tell you when we talk about long-term care, once again, we do have some information from the Canadian Institute of Health Information, where we know that there are about 190,000 people living in long-term care facilities in Canada, and the vast majority of these people are older adults, often people with a life-limiting illness and a limited life expectancy, usually around in the range of years. And we know the median life expectancy in long-term care is 2 years. But a significant minority out of the 190,000, about 10,000, are actually younger people living with a disability who may actually have many years of meaningful life left.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, exactly. I mean, I'm sure you see a lot of patients that come in, and very unique, disabilities for sure, right? And they all, require the same, care that's needed. I mean, it's needed in a dignified way for sure, right? And and I guess it comes down to like what kind of how much can they really afford, in basically with their rates being so low across the country, and that kind of impacts their health. I mean, that kind of goes with my next question is, do you agree, doctor, that the PWD rates across Canada, they need to be no less than the poverty level, so that, it improves their quality of life, and that there's less strain on the healthcare system?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely, should be the case. And, I can sort of emphasize this a little bit by sort of speaking about how, disability is, first of all, both a cause and a consequence of poverty. So both of them are actually intertwined and interlinked. So meaning that if you are living in poverty, you are more likely to have a disability and be living with a disability. And if you're living with a disability, then you're more likely to be in poverty. So that's one issue. And then, I would actually say raising the rates and making sure that we are not legislating people in poverty. We are making sure that people are provided, secure, affordable housing, access to safe and nutritious food, proper, equipment, addressing accessibility, and also addressing very critical gaps in medical care are very, very important. And this is all, literally a matter of quality of life, but also actually a matter of life and death at this point in time, because we know that there's actually, we're hearing of reports in the media that, some people are even opting for medical assistance and dying, rather than, living without housing, or, rather than living in poverty, for example.
Yeah, and exactly, and like nobody should be living below the poverty line in Canada for sure, because it definitely has an impact on their health and their well-being, and when they don't have the proper nutritional foods in their life, I mean, based on their dietary supplements, that anyone really needs, but especially with a disability and different conditions that require a certain type of food types, and if they can't afford that, well then now their health diminishes down, right? And now they put more strain on the healthcare system, which it doesn't have to be that way, and basically has a huge impact on not just themselves, but also people around them too, and in society, it puts a huge strain on things for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And I will be honest, my focus is on Ontario because that's where
Yeah.
I live and work. And we know in Ontario that, a single person with a disability and no children only collects a total annual income of around $15,730, which is $9,000 below our official poverty line. And of course, this is in a context with the COVID-19 pandemic where there's rising inequities and, inflation is also very high at this point in time. So the cost of living is actually increasing, but ODSP payments are not concurrently increasing and have fallen way behind what we need to legislate people out of poverty.
Yeah, they're definitely well below the poverty line for sure. And with inflation at an all-time high, a 31-year high, national average, it was 6.8% on national average, but with the true cost of basic necessities are like 20-30%. So when they say national average, I'm thinking, wow, okay, if that was only the case, I mean, it's still high, but yeah, obviously that has a huge impact on a person's health and their well-being. And it's an income, inequality for sure, and that has to change. I mean, running against people with the different conditions with their disabilities. I mean, there's invisible disabilities, physical disabilities. And, as I say, doctor, all the time, is that anyone at any time in their life can become disabled, no fault of their own. I mean, they're either born with it or they can develop it. And as the aging population, people get older, they will develop a disability. I mean, 1 in 5 people, that's what the stats I was reading. I almost think it's 1 in 4, but they say 1 in 5, I mean, have some form of a disability, maybe not, to a major degree, but it does have an impact on their lives for sure, and that number only becomes greater.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Brent. You brought up some great points that, and those are, consistent with the statistics that we've all read, that 1 in 5, people over age 15 lives with a disability in Canada. And, the numbers actually go up to over 40% from what I've read for people who are aged 75 and over. And I can tell you very clearly as a palliative care physician that, for all of us in some way, that, there's not a lot which separates, somebody who's, able-bodied and, perhaps healthy, to living with a disability. We're all a serious illness or an accident away from, living with a disability, requiring services and care and support that should be provided to everyone with a disability. So the tables can actually turn quickly. And this really shows us that we need to kind of reframe how we think of providing care and support to people in our society and, start from a place of justice and start from a place of empathy as well.
Yeah. And I had a neighbor one time who was playing hockey. Basically, got into a really bad accident playing hockey, and basically became wheelchair bound permanently. No feeling down anywhere, like legs, nothing. Like it was all the way down, and spinal cord, a major spinal cord injury. Right, it just severed the spinal cord. I remember one time him and I were talking, right, and we'd be playing like a little bit of ball hockey outside, and he says, "Oh, I just never could imagine, somebody with a disability. I mean, how do you cope?" And I said, I just that's who I am. I was born with it. It's just my identity." And he says, "Oh, I mean, sorry to hear that." I'm like, "Well, I'm not sorry to hear that. That's just part of my life, right? And I don't know what I would ever do." Then all of a sudden, he became disabled. Like it was a short time later, and it really struck me that anybody at any time can become disabled, and that's how I actually learned, years later, doctor, that I am strong advocate for people with disabilities, and like listening to what their experiences are and what they go through. Launching this show, I do this all the time since January, because I wanted to see a change and bring people together of common experiences of what they go through, and allies of what they see or hear of what's going on too, and kind of bringing everyone in the same space.
Thank you so much for for doing that work and creating a community, and really hoping that as someone sort of as part of this conversation this evening, I'm hoping that I can learn from you, and other people, how we can do better to advocate for people with disabilities. And I hope that there will be a day when we don't see legislated poverty, and we actually provide people the respect, the dignity and the care and the support that they deserve.
Yeah, and I thank you for those really nice comments on that. And I don't have the answers for everybody, like for everything for people with unique disabilities. And I listen to people, and I bring them all in and talk about what they go through and what they want to see changed. And having guests like yourself come on and talk about what you see, what's happening around you, and what you have to go through, and listening to patients that you deal with. It's so important to getting that narrative out there. And you're right on that, Amit, is that nobody should be living in legislated poverty. It is a policy decision. Poverty is designed that way, and I don't know. I think it was written way back in the early 1900s or something crazy thing like that, but it says they just tweak it along. But I mean, everyone needs like a basic income going forward, and so much automation that's going to be taking over things, and because they just can't always do the same kind of work that they used to be able to do, due to their visual impairment, physical impairment. Whatever the disability is, it takes a wear on it, either mentally or physically, or both, right? And stats showing that because of that COVID, what's happened too. A lot of people were developing long COVID, and that's pretty scary stuff too. Maybe if you want to, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about long COVID. Have you heard much what's happening with that?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. So we know that, I think that, the COVID-19 pandemic has, made, first of all, it's created a higher level of acuity in terms of how we care for and support for people living with disabilities. And COVID-19 itself is a mass disabling event. So we know that actually the most common complication of COVID-19 right now in the vaccine era, where we have so many, people here in Canada who have gotten vaccinated, and many of us still continue to mask, even though it's not mandatory. The most common complication perhaps is not necessarily serious illness, or it's not necessarily ending up in the ICU or death, thankfully. But, once again, it is long COVID or post-COVID syndrome. And we know that even conservative estimates suggest that perhaps about 10% of people who contract COVID-19 will suffer prolonged symptoms. Yesterday, there was some data that was put out from the CDC, which I encourage you to look at, which says that I believe 1 in 5 people who have COVID-19 30 days after will develop a new health condition. So we don't know actually how much, how many people actually have long COVID. It's likely thousands of people, and we don't know how many of those people are struggling to return to their basic activities of life. And what's even sort of more sad about this personally is that I feel that we're not really talking about long COVID enough. Often people who are suffering with long COVID are the people who are not hospitalized or not in the ICU, but people who have been labeled as having mild COVID illness. But it's actually not mild. There can be a range of symptoms that are quite disabling, including, of course, neurological symptoms such as brain fog, sometimes headaches as well, respiratory symptoms, shortness of breath, and also severe fatigue to the point where people can't return to work and they have trouble with their activities of daily living. So we need more supports for people with long COVID. But of course, as we're speaking about this evening, this starts with addressing the social determinants of health. It also starts by making sure that we provide people the proper care and social supports that they need.
Oh, absolutely. It's bringing awareness to a lot of those issues for sure.